Why do you celebrate Easter today? Do you really know, or are you just repeating a tradition without understanding its weight? Because there comes a moment when tradition without awareness becomes empty routine, and empty routine doesn't transform anyone. And let me ask you something directly. If you take away the chocolate, the food, and the family gathering, what is left of your Easter? Silence, right? And that silence reveals a lot, because many people celebrate without realizing that this day carries a message that confronts, that demands a decision, that calls for change, and calm down. This isn't to scare you. It's to wake you up, because ignoring the true meaning can make you live an entire life without understanding what could change everything. Now pay attention, because this is serious. It's not just about remembering an event. It's about understanding what that event requires from you today. And look, if you think you already know everything about Easter, stay with me until the end, because there's a detail almost no one notices, and it might turn the key in your life in a way you are not expecting. The true meaning of Christ's sacrifice and resurrection goes far beyond a historical event or a religious celebration, because it represents a profound message of love, redemption, and hope that continues to transform lives across generations. At its core, the sacrifice speaks of unconditional love, a love that does not depend on human perfection, merit, or worthiness. It is a love that reaches into the depths of human brokenness and offers restoration, even when there is no justification for such grace. This kind of love challenges human understanding, because it goes against the natural tendency to repay wrong with punishment, instead choosing to absorb the cost of wrongdoing and offer forgiveness. The sacrifice highlights the seriousness of sin, not to condemn humanity, but to reveal the depth of what was required to restore the broken relationship between humanity and God. It shows that reconciliation is not a light matter, but something that carries weight and consequence. Through this act, the value of each human life is emphasized, because such a price reflects how deeply each person is valued and loved. It confronts indifference and calls for awareness, reminding individuals that their choices matter and that there is a greater purpose beyond temporary existence. The resurrection, on the other hand, is the powerful declaration that the sacrifice was not in vain. It represents victory over death, defeat of despair, and the breaking of limitations that once seemed permanent. Where the sacrifice speaks of payment, the resurrection speaks of triumph. Where there was once finality, there is now continuation. This moment transforms the narrative from loss to victory, from sorrow to hope, from defeat to restoration. It assures that death does not have the final word, and that what seems like an ending can actually be a new beginning. Together, the sacrifice and resurrection form a complete message. The sacrifice addresses the problem of sin, while the resurrection confirms the solution and validates the promise. One without the other would leave the story incomplete, but together they reveal a full picture of redemption and renewal. This unity demonstrates that transformation is possible, no matter how far one may have gone or how heavy the burden may seem. This message also carries a call to personal reflection, because it is not just something to observe, but something to respond to. It invites individuals to examine their own lives, their choices, and their direction. It challenges complacency and encourages a deeper level of awareness, urging people to move beyond surface-level understanding and into genuine transformation. This reflection is not meant to create fear alone, but to inspire a shift in perspective, leading to a more intentional and meaningful way of living. The meaning of this event also extends into everyday life, influencing how a person thinks, acts, and relates to others. It introduces the concept of forgiveness, not as a weakness, but as a strength that has the power to break cycles of bitterness and resentment. It encourages patience, compassion, and humility, because these qualities reflect the same spirit that was demonstrated through the sacrifice. When understood deeply, it reshapes priorities, shifting focus from temporary gains to lasting values, from self-centered living to a life of purpose and impact. Another important aspect is the assurance of new life. The resurrection symbolizes renewal, not only in a spiritual sense, but also in the way a person lives and approaches challenges. It suggests that no situation is beyond restoration, no mistake is beyond redemption, and no individual is beyond hope. This assurance brings a sense of peace, because it removes the fear of final failure and replaces it with the possibility of starting again. It encourages perseverance, even in difficult circumstances, because there is always a promise that something new can emerge from what seems lost. The message also speaks to identity. It reminds individuals that they are not defined by their past, their failures, or their limitations, but by the grace that has been extended to them. This shift in identity changes how a person views themselves and how they approach life. It fosters confidence, not in personal ability alone, but in the strength that comes from being connected to a greater purpose. This identity brings clarity, direction, and a sense of belonging that cannot be easily shaken. In understanding the true meaning of Christ's sacrifice and resurrection, one begins to see that it is not just a story to be remembered once a year, but a reality that continues to shape lives every day. It is a call to transformation, a reminder of love, and an invitation to live with purpose, awareness, and hope. It challenges indifference, calls for reflection, and offers a path forward that is rooted in grace, strengthened by truth, and sustained by a promise that extends beyond what can be seen or fully understood. A call to personal reflection and spiritual renewal is an invitation to pause, to look inward with honesty, and to reassess the direction of one's life in light of deeper truths. It is not a superficial moment of thought, but a deliberate and intentional process that requires courage, humility, and a willingness to confront what is often ignored. Many people move through life on autopilot, repeating routines, making decisions based on habit, and rarely stopping to examine whether their actions align with their values or purpose. This call interrupts that pattern, urging a shift from mindless living to mindful awareness. Personal reflection begins with honesty. It requires a person to ask difficult questions about their thoughts, intentions, and behaviors. It asks whether the life being lived is truly aligned with what matters most, or whether it has been shaped by external pressures, expectations, and distractions. This kind of reflection is not always comfortable because it reveals areas that may need change, growth, or correction. However, it is within this discomfort that transformation begins. Without honest reflection, there can be no genuine progress because one cannot change what one refuses to acknowledge. Spiritual renewal goes beyond external adjustments. It touches the inner core of a person's being. It is not simply about improving behavior, but about renewing the mind, restoring the heart, and realigning one's spirit with a higher purpose. This renewal brings clarity where there was confusion, peace where there was unrest, and direction where there was uncertainty. It is a process that reshapes priorities, refines character, and strengthens the inner foundation upon which decisions are made. When a person experiences true spiritual renewal, their perspective shifts from temporary concerns to eternal values, from self-centered desires to a greater sense of purpose. This call also challenges complacency. It confronts the tendency to become comfortable with a life that lacks depth or meaning. Complacency often disguises itself as stability, but in reality, it can prevent growth and limit potential. The call to reflection and renewal disrupts this comfort zone, urging individuals to examine whether they are truly growing or simply maintaining the status quo. It pushes beyond surface-level existence and calls for a deeper engagement with life, where every action is intentional and every decision carries significance. Another important aspect of this call is awareness. Many people are unaware of how their thoughts, emotions, and habits shape their reality. Without awareness, it becomes easy to fall into patterns that are harmful or unproductive. Reflection brings these patterns to light, allowing a person to recognize areas that need change. This awareness is the first step toward transformation, because it creates the opportunity to make different choices. Spiritual renewal builds on this awareness, providing the strength and guidance needed to move in a new direction. This process also involves letting go. Renewal cannot take place while holding on to past mistakes, regrets, or burdens that weigh the heart down. Letting go does not mean forgetting, but rather releasing the emotional weight that hinders growth. It means choosing to move forward without being defined by past failures. This act of release creates space for new perspectives, new experiences, and a renewed sense of hope. It allows the individual to step into a future that is not limited by the past. Forgiveness plays a significant role in this journey. It includes forgiving others for their wrongs and also forgiving oneself. Holding on to resentment or guilt can prevent healing and block the process of renewal. Forgiveness does not excuse wrongdoing, but it frees the individual from the burden of carrying it. When forgiveness is embraced, it opens the door to peace and restoration, allowing the heart to heal and move forward without being trapped by bitterness or self-condemnation. This call to reflection and renewal also emphasizes the importance of alignment. A person's thoughts, words, and actions must be in harmony with their values and beliefs. When there is alignment, there is a sense of integrity and authenticity. When there is misalignment, internal conflict arises, creating tension and dissatisfaction. Spiritual renewal restores this alignment, bringing unity between what one believes and how one lives. This harmony leads to a more balanced and fulfilling life. Discipline is another key element in this process. Reflection and renewal require consistent effort and intentional practice. It is not a one-time event, but an ongoing journey. Discipline is needed to maintain focus, to continue reflecting, and to make necessary changes even when it is difficult. Without discipline, old habits can easily return, and progress can be lost. However, with discipline, growth becomes sustainable, and transformation becomes lasting. Victory over sin, death, and a transformed life through faith represents a profound shift in how a person understands existence, purpose, and identity. It is not merely a change in behavior, but a deep transformation that begins within the heart and gradually influences every area of life. This victory speaks to the power to overcome what once seemed uncontrollable, the ability to rise above patterns that once defined a person, and the hope that what was broken can be restored into something new and meaningful. Sin, in its essence, represents separation, a condition where actions, thoughts, and choices drift away from what is right, true, and life-giving. It creates distance, not only in a spiritual sense, but also in the way a person relates to themselves and to others. It often begins subtly, through small compromises, repeated choices, or unchecked desires, and over time, it can shape habits that feel difficult to break. The victory over sin is not about human perfection or effort alone, but about being freed from its controlling influence. It is the moment when a person is no longer defined by their past mistakes, but by the possibility of change and restoration. Death, in this context, represents more than the end of physical life. It symbolizes hopelessness, finality, and the belief that something cannot be undone or renewed. It is the feeling of being stuck, of having reached a point where nothing seems to change. Victory over death introduces a powerful contrast because it challenges the idea that anything is beyond redemption. It brings the assurance that even what appears to be an ending can become a new beginning. This perspective changes how a person faces challenges because it replaces despair with hope and limitation with possibility. A transformed life through faith is the result of this victory being fully embraced and lived out. Faith becomes the foundation upon which this transformation is built. It is not just belief in something abstract, but a trust that shapes decisions, actions, and attitudes. This faith influences how a person responds to challenges, how they treat others, and how they see themselves. It creates a shift from living based on fear and uncertainty to living with confidence and purpose. Transformation is not instant, but it is continuous. It begins with a decision to believe, followed by a process of growth, learning, and renewal. As a person walks in faith, their thoughts begin to change, their priorities shift, and their actions reflect a new way of living. Old patterns are gradually replaced with healthier ones, and behaviors that once dominated begin to lose their hold. This process requires patience and perseverance because change takes time, and growth often comes through challenges. One of the most significant aspects of this transformation is the change in identity. A person who experiences this victory no longer sees themselves as bound by their past or limited by their failures. Instead, they begin to understand their value, their purpose, and their potential. This new identity brings confidence, not in personal ability alone, but in the strength that comes from being connected to something greater. It allows a person to walk with assurance, knowing that they are not alone in their journey. This victory also brings freedom. Freedom from guilt, from shame, from patterns that once controlled behavior. It is a release from the weight of carrying past mistakes, and an opportunity to start fresh. This freedom is not a license to act without responsibility, but rather an invitation to live with greater awareness and intention. It opens the door to a life that is no longer driven by fear, but guided by purpose and truth. Another important aspect is the renewal of the mind. Transformation begins in the way a person thinks. Old thought patterns are replaced with new perspectives, allowing for a clearer understanding of life and its challenges. This renewal influences how situations are interpreted and how decisions are made. Instead of reacting impulsively, a person begins to respond with wisdom and clarity. This shift in thinking is essential because it determines the direction of actions and the quality of outcomes. The victory over sin, death, and the resulting transformed life through faith also impacts relationships. As a person changes internally, their interactions with others begin to reflect that change. There is greater patience, more understanding, and a deeper sense of compassion. Conflicts are handled with more maturity, and communication becomes more thoughtful and respectful. This transformation creates a ripple effect, influencing not only the individual, but also the people around them. Faith plays a central role in sustaining this transformation. It provides strength during difficult times, guidance when decisions are unclear, and hope when circumstances seem uncertain. It is the anchor that keeps a person grounded, even when challenges arise. Without faith, the process of transformation would be difficult to maintain, because it is faith that provides the motivation to continue growing and the assurance that change is possible.